I am broadcasting on all AM frequencies. I will be at the South Street Seaport every day at midday, when the sun is highest in the sky. If you are out there, if anyone is out there, I can provide food, I can provide shelter, I can provide security. If there's anybody out there, anybody, please, you are not alone.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Hey, what's up everybody? Radex here, the one from 72, the ultra neutral, and today is a video that I have been dragging my feet on for the longest time because I haven't really wanted to do it. In fact, I just got done filming. I thought I was filming this video. I got 45 minutes into it and I realized that the camera I was using wasn't recording, so there's that. I had a little frustration, and that video actually was, I was going really deep in depth detail, so I'm not going to go that deep into this. I'm going to kind of shorten it up a little bit. You're just going to have to do most of the research on your own. The fact that most of the human species minds are blocked anyhow, they're programmed not to see certain things, it's going to be hard for you to understand, but if you can, congratulations to you, because that's another door that's getting cracked open in your mind for you to take a hard look at this. And so what are we talking about today? Today we're talking about the 33rd President of the United States, Harry Truman. He became the president April 12th, 1945, in fact. And he was the president until January 20th, 1953. So we're going to take a look at what happened throughout his presidency. But we also need to go back to his childhood first to see how he got there, right? To really take a look at really who he was and how he became this 33rd President of the United States. You know that number 33 is extremely important to a certain set group of people, here in this country, that, to get to the highest degree, you got to become the 33rd. Now, why is this all so important? Because he died in the year 1972. You need to know about Harry Truman, and you really need to start taking a real hard look at him, because the fact that I don't believe that he is actually a true man, and I don't mean that because of some of the things you're going to hear about him, but I don't believe that he was, it's even the name True Man, right? Like Truman, true man. Like, I truly believe that this was either the first alien influenced president or some type of, not just interaction or stuff with, another alien species, but maybe actually was replaced by an alien species. So it's very bizarre when you really look at everything with him, all the interactions, everything with aliens, and he definitely sold out the human species. He either sold out the human species, or he was directly working, I mean, he's connected to the 1972, or he was directly working descendant, or he was some other species. He definitely wasn't looking out for the best interests of your species, that's for sure, if you're listening to this and you're human. So, and the number 33, look, there was a person over in Germany who became the Fuhrer in 1933, so the number 33, it's very important. This whole thing is just you'll start be able to connect the dots, hopefully, by the time I get to the end of this. So let's get started. First of all, you know, Harry Truman was born in like 1884. So he was born in the 1800s. So I need you to take yourself out of 2021. Take yourself away from the mindset, all things that are going on in 2021, and go back to the 1800s, late 1800s, 1884. So when we talk about his childhood, we talk about who he was and how important it was for men to be men in that era, right? Like there was no room for being the town sissy. There was no room for any of that stuff. You had to be a man like all the other men. Okay? So when we take a look at him, you know, he was a very weak child. In fact, it was reported that he was referred to as being a cripple. Now, I don't understand why they call him a cripple, because he obviously could run and do other things like, you know, stuff like other boys could. You know, his mother was the one who encouraged him to get out of the house and go roughhouse with boys. That doesn't make sense in 1884. Why was his mother pushing him out of the house to go roughhouse with the other boys? Like, what's going on there? He also had poor eyesight, so he couldn't see very well. He had little squinty little eyes, you know. He was a frail kind of guy. He was kind of considered kind of a cripple. That's what this says in the reports. And he really wanted to play piano. That's what he wanted to do. He didn't want to go out there and roughhouse with the boys. He wanted to play piano. He wanted to be like the first Liberace or first before Elton John. He wanted to be the first. Maybe if all the other stuff went, maybe that's where he would have ended up, right? But it's just not the case. Not for Harry Truman, the 33rd president of the United States. You know, they said that he wanted to attend West Point. I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. He didn't want to go roughhouse with boys. He was already picked on. You could tell he was bullied and all that stuff. But yet all of a sudden he wants to. They say that he wanted to attend West Point. That doesn't seem like someplace that this piano enthusiast, who is his mother's trying to push him out the door, would want to go in the the late 1800s to go where there's a bunch of rough boys in West Point, right? Like, it just doesn't even add up. Doesn't make any sense. You know, he had poor eyesight, you know. And by the way, and they also said that, you know, because of his poor eyesight, because of, you know, his limitations, that he would never get a commission in the military anyhow, even if he went to West Point. So that just doesn't even make, this stuff doesn't make sense. But this is the history when you look it up, right? It doesn't make sense when the fact that he ended up going into the military. So after he graduated high school, he wanted to go to college. Well, his father had financial problems. He had a failing farm, didn't have any money, couldn't put Harry Truman, poor little Harry Truman, in a good college. So Truman had to attend some like business college that was not, you know, obviously on the scale of like a legit, you know, one of the bigger colleges. So he decided that he was going to go to a business college. He would take what was the next step down, didn't cost a lot of money or whatever. He went there. Like I said, he come from a broke-ass home on a farm. And if you don't understand what it's like to live on a farm, and the people who do understand what it's like to live on a farm, and to have a farm that's failing farm, they understand exactly what I'm talking about. And so, and you imagine 1884, right? I mean, you get a whole meal you could feed the whole family for $1, right? So we're talking like way back. And so he ended up going to a business college. And while he was in that business college, he ended up dropping out. He didn't even complete the college. It was a 4-year program. He dropped out, so he failed at that. And then he went and got a job working in the mailroom at the Kansas City Star, right? Like, that's where he went. And he worked that job for a few years, and then he quit that, right? Like, so back in the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, you just don't quit jobs. You just don't quit colleges. You don't do those things. That's not like, that's kind of a loser. You'd be considered a loser back then, right? Like, this is where he ended up going back home to his father's failing farm, right? That's what he did. He quit college. He quit his job. He went back to his father's failing farm to be back home with his mommy, right? And that's really what it was. That's really what it came down to, because there was no future at the farm. So why did he go back? Like, this guy was a loser. He had nothing going on. He did get to show, they said that he joined the National Guard, and he was in the National Guard for 6 years. I think he joined in 1905, and he was in there until 1911. It wasn't like people were making a good living in the National Guard then. right? So it wasn't like this guy was doing really good. And there's a lot of things that are kind of iffy on what was going on there. So he did end up proposing to a girl that he went to high school with. And she said, absolutely not. Right? Like, he tried to propose to, like, it was almost like he was kind of pushed and nudged, you know, marry that one girl down the road, so that way people don't look at you kind of strange. The fact that you failed at everything else and you came back home, you know, at least you're a National Guard. See if she'll marry you now. She said no. By the way, she knew, and he told her that he was a cripple. Now, what do you mean that you're a cripple when you were in the National Guard for 6 years and you can run, you can do all these other things like other men can do, pretty much? What your extremities downstairs is crippled. What does that mean? Impotency? I mean, does it make any sense? Yeah, so when he got out of National Guard in 1911, it doesn't really say a whole lot about his history then. So obviously he was back on the farm, he was back living with his parents again. And his father died 3 years later, 1914. And then all of a sudden, now they make it like this is like a bad thing that happened to him. Like oh my gosh, his father who owned the failing farm died. You know, what is Truman gonna do? All of a sudden, it says in the history that right after his father died, Harry Truman tries his hand in opening a small mining company. Well, where'd this guy get this money from? Obviously, when his father died, he must have sold off his father's stuff, his failing farm or whatever, and used that money because he took a shoddy couple of courses in a business college, which he ended up dropping out and failing. And he decided he was going to open up a mining company. Well, that failed. It went bankrupt. And then he decides that he wants to take a shot at an oil company. And then that, you know, he wants to become a business partner, so he talked somebody into being a business partner with him. Because obviously he wasn't like somebody who had all this money and some big successful guy, so he had to been him, because said he was partner with somebody in an oil business, so he had to talk that person into it. And then that business took a shit. So he failed at the mining company, he failed at the oil company, he lost everything. All that stuff, it's just all, and he was a failure in college, dropout. Like this guy, and he had all these other issues going on, bad eyesight, he was considered crippled downstairs, you know, wanted to play the piano, but kept going back home to his mommy, you know. And then in 1917, he decides to join the National Guard again, right? Because he failed at all this other stuff that he was trying to do, these businesses. So he's like, well, I'll just join back the National Guard. So that's what he did. He tried his hand in luck by going back to the National Guard. There's no way possible that this guy was out there like Rambo in the National Guard. He literally was like, the stuff that they say about his military career, I'm pretty sure a lot of it was fabricated anyhow. You know, it was all concocted stuff from his merits from World War I and what he did. Because to polish up the shit stain of the past that he had before. Like, it had to do something because he was the 33rd president, right? So we know that they're going to change things in history. And by the way, in 1917, and this is important, you need to hear this. In 1917, what was considered the miracle of the sun, this happened. So when the first World War I was started, when Harry Truman was there for the very first war, look up the miracle of the sun. It was a series of reports that occurred that happened that they were saying that there was these 3 children, and I'm sure some of you probably heard about this, that were prophesizing that they were getting messages from the Virgin Mary. So anyhow, when Truman returns from the war in 1919, so like 2 years later, after 1917, comes back 2 years later, just like he went and he came back, you know, to his 2-year thing. He came back, and the woman that he tried to marry, she finally says yes. Why did she say yes all of a sudden? That's another thing that's very suspect. That whole thing's suspect, and I don't really want to get deep into that. I don't really have the time to go deep into that. It's very bizarre. Like, was he the only guy in town? There was no other suitors? Like, all this time, and then she decides, oh, yes, I'll marry you. And despite the fact that he probably was impotent, which he proclaimed he was crippled downstairs somewhere. And he was not a very brawny guy. He was kind of weakly, bad eyesight, failed at businesses, failed at all these things, losing the farm, kept trying to go back home to his mommy. 4 years later, after that, they ended up having a child. Well, I'd like to, by the way, they named her Mary. Now, remember, 1917, when the children had the Virgin Mary thing, and his name's his child, Mary. This kind of gets kind of weird here. But I would like to have seen the DNA to see if that actually was his child, because it was the only child that him and this woman that he married had. It was it, and he named her Mary. Now, by the way, if you look up Mary Margaret Truman, who she is, it says that she was an American classic actress, a journalist, a radio and television personality, a writer, and a New York socialite. So she became somebody because of her father. And that's really what it comes down to, which I'm not begrudging that. That's obviously, it makes sense. If we're going to do that, they're going to push their kids. I mean, you look at Will Smith and Jaden. See how that worked out. But anyhow, she wrote a bunch of books, right? Like, she's famous for writing these books, and these books were all called murder. Murder, 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 murder. Murder this, murder that. It was all these things that had to do with, like, murder and government stuff. And the one that she was most famous for was murder in the White House. Now, we're going to talk about that in a minute, because remember, he became the 33rd president. You connect the dots yourself. But that was his daughter's most famous book, Murder in the White House. It may not have anything to do with what happened to Roosevelt, but it's just the fact of the title of the book, and who she was, and who her father was. So anyhow, Truman, you know, when he didn't have anything else going on, he came back from the war. He decided he was going to open a clothing store, which doesn't make any sense, because before he tried a mining company, an oil company, and now clothing. None of those three things do not connect at all. They don't make any sense. It's just like some guy who's just spitballing stuff, trying to make money, and all failures. And this wasn't the exception. It also was a failure. So while he's trying to raise, you know, his daughter and take care of his wife, and by the way, I think his wife was wealthy too. I believe that she come from like a wealthy family, right? Like, so he didn't have the money for those other businesses and stuff before, because he wasn't married to her. It wasn't until later, after he came back from the first war, that she married him. Why in the hell would this daughter from this wealthy family marry this guy? Like, this is the guy? Like, that's the guy? That's who she had to choose from? That doesn't add up. It does not make sense at all. And by the way, his family was reportedly always looked down on Harry Truman. I mean, this is all very, very bizarre, right? And in fact, the money he got from the clothing company probably came from her. And he decided he's going to open up a clothing store, and it took a shit. And by the way, while his company was going into bankruptcy and he was heavily in debt now, you know, while he was there, all of a sudden, these people started coming around who were considered the good old boys, who supposedly he had met while he was in the military, while he was serving in the military. I don't believe. They came in there, and there was like one main guy. His name was Pendergrass. And Pendergrass was the guy who put the little bug in little Harry Truman's ear and said, hey, you should go into politics. And he helped push Truman to become a district judge, county commissioner, right? Like, I think that's how, whatever it was. And that he was elected in, I think, 1924. But it was this Pendergrass guy who pushed him. This is the guy who kind of pushed him through. Later in his career, Harry Truman's career, Pendergrass again helped push Truman to get into the Senate, right? Like, it always comes back to Pendergrass. Like, that was his main guy who kept pushing and pushing and pushing him. This guy, Truman, was a failure at everything. Why in hell would anybody, like, it's like, this is like you come to somebody, it's just like Brewster's Millions here. Like, they came to him and just said, here, just gifted him into political. Like, this guy was a failure. You don't choose somebody who's a constant failure to get into a political arena and expect them to be successful. And when you go into political arena, you boast about all your successes. This guy had no successes. Pendergrass was his guy. And by the way, when Harry Truman went to go for re-election for Senate, Pendergrass ended up going to prison and falling ill while he was in prison. Yeah, his main guy, Pendergrass, ended up going to prison for tax evasion, where he had to serve 15 months. During that time, Truman's political career started struggling hard, right? Like, it was just, everything was falling apart. And then World War II started. And when World War II started, they say Harry Truman was famous for saying, his famous quote about, you know, when they asked him, you know, what do you think about World War II? He said, we are facing a bunch of thugs. And the only theory a thug understands is a gun and a bayonet. This guy never was, like, in the trenches and fighting in World War I. Like, this guy was not a tough guy at all. He's talking tough, talking shit, right? But yet he said this. Well, we also know somebody else who never had any military fight or any stuff, and he also said, you know, the famous calling people thugs, a bunch of thugs, you know. We know who that, you know, recent president used to say that. So it's just very, very kind of suspect, you know. In 1944, President Roosevelt decided to drop Harry A. Wallace during World War II. That was his, because it was now, you know, the president was Roosevelt during World War II. And he decided he wanted to drop his vice president, which is very weird. Why all of a sudden would you just kick your vice president out? There's some very suspect things that went on there. Usually, a president just doesn't get rid of their vice president in the middle of their term. That's very, very, like, this opening is just bizarre the way it happened during World War II. Like, oh, I'm gonna fire my. That's a bad time for morale. For the president, the commander-in-chief during World War II to say, hey, I'm going to get rid of my vice president, does not make sense. And all of a sudden, Harry Truman gets the job. like, he gets the job as vice president. Like, right on the spot. He's like, oh yeah, he's like, you know what, hey, I'll take that Truman guy. Yeah, he's a good man's man, somebody that we need, you know, tough guy. For this, you know, while, you know, I'm going to replace my vice president, make him vice president during the middle of a war. Harry Truman, a failure, an utter failure. And he becomes vice president like that. Like a genie snapped its fingers and voila, this guy just becomes vice president. He was not shaking any big political trees. In fact, they said he was kind of very mousy before all this, before he became the president, you know? So he becomes vice president. And Harry Truman was not a major player in the Roosevelt administration at all. He was insignificant. He had no relationship with the president at all. Like, who told Roosevelt to take this guy and make him vice president? That's another thing. Who told him to do this? Because it reportedly says that Roosevelt had no connections with this guy. And he wasn't even part of his administration. All of a sudden, boom, he makes him. He wasn't even a part of the administration, guys. And he just becomes vice president just like that. I'm going to fire Wallace and put Truman in there. In 1944, the famous reports of the Foo Fighters were documented. That later ended up in Project Blue Book. So that same year in 44. Truman served only 82 days. And if you don't know about the Foo Fighters, let me go back to that. If you don't know about the Foo Fighters, you need to go look it up. That was the first real documentation of any UFOs. That happened when Harry Truman became the president, or the vice president. Now all of a sudden, Germany is saying, hey, there's UFOs over here. Actually, the first big documented picture was in 1944, when this guy becomes vice president out of nowhere. And after he becomes vice president, remember, this whole thing, it doesn't even make any sense, right? Like, the vice president gets fired, then all of a sudden Harry Truman, who's nobody, becomes a vice president during the middle of war. 82 days later, the president of the United States, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, drops dead. Boom. Just gifted this guy the presidency. He went from vice president out of nowhere. He only served 82 days, and he becomes the president of the United States during the biggest war, World War II. He becomes president, just like that. Just like that. On April 12, 1945, the sitting president, Roosevelt, dies. I'm sorry, in 44, it gives you, that's 82 days, yeah. From 1944 April, okay, yeah, so then, and then he dies, right? And Truman becomes president of the United States, takes it as the 33rd president. Now it's the number 33, 33rd president. And like I said before, you know, it's rumored that, you know, hey, you know, there's, to get into a certain club, some clubs you have to get into, you have to make sacrifices to get in there, and just say this president, you know, sacrifice president. Hey, you know, you connect the dots on that yourself. You know, I'm not, look, the thing is I take a neutral stance even on that group in that club, because you all make it possible for them to be there anyhow. You know that they're there. They've been there for a very long time. And nobody has stopped him from being there. And people join them and they do these rituals and things that they do. So I take a neutral stance on it. So I'm not against them. I'm not for them or against them. That's the country. That's what you want. You allow it to happen. So there it is. And either you're in the club or you're not in the club. And for those of you who don't understand that, you understand. You don't understand, you don't understand it. And that's how he became the 33rd president of the United States. When Truman became the president, this is his famous quote. It felt like the moon, the stars, and all of the planets had fallen on me. What do you mean by all of the planets, bro? True, man. What do you mean by what? Okay, the moon and the stars, and and all the planets. Like that's on a now he's talking a huge scale. We're talking. This is like 1944. They didn't have NASA then. By the way, he's responsible for that too, and we're gonna get into that. So, yeah, that was his famous quote. The moon, the stars, and all the planets had fallen on me. This is not, he wasn't the same as your species. Read between the lines, human. Okay, so anyhow, Oppenheimer was among those who observed the Trinity test in New Mexico. And if you don't know who Oppenheimer is, you can look it up on your own. And Oppenheimer was there to see the first, they call it the Trinity test, by the way. And it was the first atomic bomb that was detonated, that was successfully detonated. Now here you go, July 16th, 1945. 1 month later, after that, Truman became the bringer of death in Japan. 1 month after they successfully detonated this bomb, right? And Oppenheimer was famously quoted by saying about this bomb in the Bada Giga, whatever, aliens, blue aliens, pretty much, had this quote from their book that says, "Now I become death, the destroyer of worlds." And that was talking about that bomb, which pretty much was, you know, like a nuclear bomb. This big, massive bomb. You think of that quote, "Now I become death, the destroyer of worlds," and 1 month later, Harry Truman uses it. True man, who became a president, the 33rd, out of nowhere. In this famous quote of becoming the bringer of death. On August 6, 1945, during World War II, 4 months after Truman became the President of the United States, approximately 80,000 people were killed after the little boy bomb destroyed Hiroshima. Now I become death, the destroyer of worlds. The second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, killing 40,000 people. Now I become death, the destroyer of worlds. This guy became president in 82 days out of nowhere. Now I become death, the destroyer of worlds. I felt like the stars and the moon and all of the planets fell on me. This is all extraterrestrial talk. This is all God type of talk. This is not like a normal human talking, coming from somebody who was a mousy guy, who was impotent, who couldn't see very well, who couldn't roughhouse, who came from a failing farm and failing businesses and all these things, who was pushed to the political arena by somebody who ended up in prison. Does not make sense for him to sound this grand and to use there has been, in the history of man, there has never been this much death ordered by one man. Ever. Not even to this day. That's 120,000 people gone in a flash. Right? How do they even get to this point? Right? Like, if you even look at, like, it's kind of bizarre, like, the Fuhrer, who didn't have blonde hair, didn't have blue eyes, yet he said to make a perfect race with blonde hair and blue eyes. Why would he say that would be the perfect race, right? Well, we now know that there is a species, if you don't know, well, there are people who do know, you need to look it up, called the tall blondes, who are just another type of humanoid that look human, that come from another planet. You know, there is many UFO investigative reports from, Air Force veterans who had high rank in the Air Force and worked on nuclear facilities, and said that nuclear sites, and they've said that, look, aliens have come, the UFOs have come and shut our nukes down. Look it up if you don't know about that. And so who's the first person to drop these type of weapons? Well, it's Harry Truman. Yeah, it's just, come on. And so you see that there's this connection. There's obviously a connect with these things. In July 16th, 1945, the U.S. detonates the first nuclear bomb, codenamed Trinity. October 24th, 1945, right after that, the United Nations officially began. And Truman was the first president to ever attend. So after he becomes president, drops this, wipes out 120,000 people in a flash. All of a sudden now, hey, there's going to be a United Nations where all these countries are going to come together. And he becomes the first American president to become a part of the United Nations. You're not putting the two and two together, human? In 1945, the same year, Operation Paperclip, which was a secret United States intelligence program in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were taken from former Nazi Germany to the U.S. and employed in the United States government. 1,600. That's a lot. That's why I keep saying they didn't go over there to go win the war. They went over there for a rescue mission. And also, who we now know, who came over there from that program, from Operation Paperclip, was Wernher von Braun. He was part of that. And Wernher von Braun was responsible for NASA. Wernher von Braun worked in CERN when it first opened. If you don't know who Wernher von Braun is, by the way, he's part of the 1972 time hack because he quit NASA in 1972. You need to look up who Wernher von Braun is and how important he is to rocketeering. NASA would never have happened had Harry Truman not brought him over here through this secret program in 1945 in the program called Operation Paperclip. July 7th, 1947. During Truman's administration, the Roswell UFO crash happened. That happened during the time that he was president. That's the biggest UFO incident, crash that we know about, right? That's the main one. That happened while he was president. So all this alien stuff happens while Truman was president. That happened in 1947. You should know all the things that came out of that, like fiber optics and all kinds of other stuff that they talked about that came from that crash. Or was it a crash? I mean, hey, Truman was the president during the time that happened. In 1947, the Majestic 12, an executive order by the United States President Harry Truman to facilitate recovery and investigation of alien spacecraft. And that was called the Majestic 12. They called it MJ-12. You have to look into that. That was so Truman was covering up a ton of stuff, all the alien stuff. This president is the one who is covering it all up. Remember how he even became president. Remember, I become the destroyer of worlds. Remember the stars and the moon and all the planets falling on me. All this stuff, and just so happens he was the president during all this alien interaction, all these things that were going on, the Majestic 12, the Foo Fighters, the, Roswell crash, all this stuff happened while this man was in office. It's also suggested, if you look this up, that John F. Kennedy was threatening that he was going to reveal the MJ-12. Look it up. And then they're saying the alien, in this whole alien negotiations that was supposedly that took place. Well, those alien negotiations would have happened under Truman. People said that was a reason for his assassination. Look it up. MJ-12 and John F. Kennedy. Look that up. 1947, Einstein and Oppenheimer lays out general principles. In 1947, they wrote this general principles that they were laying out. And this is Albert Einstein and that Oppenheimer. Remember Destroyer of Worlds to talk about all the stuff about the bomb that Truman used? They proposed a peaceful, interacting with aliens, a clear sign to the readers. So basically what they were doing is they were laying out how to approach and deal with aliens from another world. Einstein and Oppenheimer, go look that up. And, you know, because they say the conspiracy theorists and stuff like that, if you look on websites, you see these, you know, all this stuff about that. You can look it up yourself, that there was a speech. Why did they come out talking about this stuff in 1947? You know, under Harry Truman. You know, how to deal with aliens and stuff. September 18th, 1947, Harry Truman creates the CIA. In other words, there was no CIA before Harry Truman. The Central Intelligence Agency was formed. That was 1947. Remember, MJ-12 was created, the Roswell crash happened, Einstein and Oppenheimer were talking about how to deal with aliens and stuff, and then all of a sudden the CIA was created. Also that same day, in September 18th, 1947, the United States created the Department of Defense. Imagine living in America without the Department of Defense, the DOD. Well, guess what? Truman created that. Also, that same day, in September 18th, 1947, Truman created the United States Air Force. That's right. There was no Air Force before then. And the Air Force is the biggest connection to the UFO conspiracies and all that stuff. The Air Force. Obviously, the air base that's here, Wright-Patterson Air Base. Ta-da! And he created that, 1947, the Air Force, a whole branch of the military, the one that's like responsible for winning, you know, all the stuff that's going down, you know, that all these air battles and stuff, and you have the Blackbird, all that stuff comes from the Air Force. You know, the things that we have, the planes and stuff that you have now that, you know, look like UFOs, you know, stealth bombers and all that come from the Air Force, which is all responsible under Harry Truman. 1947, they also say that it's possible that Harry Truman was responsible for starting the Cold War. This is not important to you right now because you're in 2021 and you're listening to this, so who cares about the Cold War? But there are people then who were freaking out. They thought that was it. The War III was going to happen. Harry Truman was pretty much responsible for starting the Cold War. 1947. April 4th, 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization began, NATO, which you probably don't care about that because, you know, hey, look where we are now. But NATO, you will hear about if you pay attention to the news and pay attention. Anytime they talk about war over, you know, to do with, you know, Russia, they always talk about NATO. Yeah, well, Harry Truman was responsible for NATO. March 1952, Project Blue Book began. That was the systematic study of unidentified flying objects by the United States Air Force. Remember, Harry Truman created the Air Force. And that's where Project Blue Book began. And by the way, Wright-Patterson Air Base here in Ohio. Project Blue Book. Look it up yourself. I'm not going to give you the whole history and detail on that, but everything that has to do with any type of UFO reports or sightings, whenever somebody saw, when a group of people came together like, oh my gosh, and you know, the town sheriff and everything, they saw a UFO and they reported it, the Air Force would step in and they would put that into the Project Blue Book, and they were just pretty much just explaining things away. It wasn't really to help people understand what's going on. They just pretty much wiped all the stuff out, covered it up. Project Blue Book was Harry Truman's baby in 1952, right towards the end for him, which was covering up all the UFO stuff. True man. July 29, 1952, Washington, D.C. had the UFO incident while Harry Truman was president. When people talk about, oh, you know, everybody's eyes will open up when a UFO lands on the White House lawn. Well, guess what? Look it up. 1952, when Harry Truman was president, there were dozens of UFOs that outran a team of United States Air Force fighter jets that were flying over Washington, D.C. That happened. That's part of history. So yes, the UFOs were there over the White House while Harry Truman was there on his way out the door. And then, November, after that, he created the National Security Agency, the NSA. Do you know who they are? Yeah, so look, guys, that's pretty much it. You have to do most of your research yourself on Truman, all these things I put out there. I laid the case out for you. Look, there's no way possible that this guy and who he was, his childhood, all his failures and all that stuff, ended up marrying this wealthy woman who turned him down before. All of a sudden, then this political guy comes in his life who ended up going to prison. He pushed his political career, this failure to become, a vice president out of nowhere, an administration that didn't even care who he was because he had no, ties with Roosevelt. And then 82 days later, that president, up and dies for this guy to become the 33rd president. And then he drops the bomb. He creates the CIA. He creates the Department of Defense. He creates the Air Force. He creates NATO. He's there for, the United Nations. He's considered responsible for starting the Cold War. And all these other UFO things happened. The most famous ones, Roswell, and the crash in Roswell happened, and the UFOs that were flying over Washington, D.C. And then he creates the National Security Agency. All that stuff under one man who should have never been president. Doesn't even make any sense. And then his daughter writes books talking about murder in the White House. I mean, come on. Yeah, if you can't connect the dots on this, I don't know what to tell you, human. You have a problem with, accepting facts and taking a look at things. And this man, Harry Truman, died in 1972. And in closing here, look, I know I forgot like a whole bunch of stuff and I missed a bunch of stuff, but my time is running short. And then he ends up dying in 1972, making him part of the 1972 time hack. And with that, enjoy the rest of the time that you have left. Welcome. You can call me Radix, the ultra neutral, the one from 72. Doing more and more research and more digging, it now is more apparent to me that we are in a natural reality dealing with an alien species that has hacked time, and because of that they have left a huge piece of evidence, which is the year 1972, and how that year actually connects to the year 2020, and how I am the only person in the world that is educating people and bringing the message and was able to predict the election in 2020 through great detail, as well as other predictions that also came true that have to do with looking at the year 1972 and the time hack and how it affected the year 2020 and will lead us into civil war, as well as a galactic war that is clearly upon all of us that is coming down. And you'll see that evidence by coming here and looking at the evidence that I present. I'm also going to be teaching you things about how flying saucers work, things about different alien species like the reptilians, the Anunnaki, and about the Greys, because I myself had a reptilian experience where my mind was unlocked, and that is one of the great reasons why I'm able to present all of this knowledge, because up until the year 2017, when my mind was unlocked, not long after that, I was starting to able to see the holes in the reality, see all the connections of the things that were going on that led to a time hack, which tells us learn from them and push forward as humanity, and not to suppress one another and suppress our own species. So if you're ready to have your mind unlocked, if you're ready to receive the message that nobody else in the world is talking about, if you're ready to see the truth, if you're ready to understand and look at the evidence, then welcome to Rat X Files.